I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen for Monday, December 7th to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first Selectmen's report. I don't have prepared remarks this evening because I'm going to give a super report in about an hour. So for those of you who are listening from home this evening, please tune in at 8 o'clock. The RTM will be meeting to do some RTM business first and then receive the annual State of the Town addresses. And it's always a fantastic way to really be updated on the inner workings of the Board of Education, the Board of Finance, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I will give a comprehensive report of the activities of the past year and, a little coming attractions for 2021. So please join us at 8 p.m. If you can't join us tonight, you will certainly be able to watch the Vimeo replay on TV 79. Kate.
I'm sorry, I have nothing. It's just been busy. I did not have time to prepare a report.
Okay. All right, then we will move right along to any board liaison reports this evening. No? Okay. David?
No.
Okay. Terrific. New business. We have Attorney Wayne Fox is here this evening to help us through our two new business items. And first on our new business item is to continue to discuss potential changes to the town charter. Kate has nicely provided us with some new sections of the charter. The first section is regarding Public Works, the Superintendent of Public Works. Probably not many people realize that Ed Gentile or whomever is in his spot is actually the Superintendent of Public Works, as well as the Director of the Department. And I believe, Kate, these are your remarks that...
Those are my comments, things that I thought of as I was reviewing the charter.
Okay, so this is section 25 of the charter, and it's very brief, so I'll read it for the public. For the execution of the functions specified in section 24 of this act, there shall be a superintendent of public works who shall be appointed by the Board of Selectmen for an indefinite term, and who shall be professional engineer registered in the state and possessing practical and technical qualifications for the duties of his office. So you can see we had a previous discussion about appointments versus employment, and you can see that the superintendent of public works is actually appointed by us. Kate had suggested some questions for us to deliberate on this evening. Should the title be changed to reflect the terms that are in use currently, such as the Director of Public Works? Does the state require that there be officially a title called Superintendent of Public Works? So I'm glad our legal expert is here. And then should this position continue to be an appointed official, or should it be treated as an employee not appointed by the Board of Selectmen? I open the floor for discussion.
Well, on the first bullet, I certainly would support a recommendation to the RTM to change the title to director unless there was some nuance in the difference of these two words. They seem like synonyms to me, unless Wayne feels there is a...
I'm not aware of any requirement
Okay.
that it be called any other title. I think superintendent would be appropriate.
Superintendent is what it
I'm sorry,
exists.
director.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We just want to make sure the statute doesn't require us to.
I'll double check that for you.
Okay.
Okay. Other than that, I would recommend that suggestion to the RTM.
Okay. Any other thoughts from the board?
I talked with Ed.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
asked him, he said superintendent is an old-fashioned word, so it's probably just, we moved on, now it's director. That's not an issue. But the next question about whether it should be appointed or an employee, the fact of the matter was, he said he was interviewed by the Board of Selectmen when he came here. he actually didn't appreciate the difference that he was appointed rather than hired. Because the second part that we're gonna get to in a minute is that right now, he evaluates all of his employees. He submits that to the town administrator, who goes through a process of evaluation. And so it really, he says, for my employees, it's sort of like, we do it now in a different way, so that part two should definitely be revised. And as far as part one goes, he feels, you know, I'm an employee, I really feel like I'm an employee.
Mhm.
I don't feel like I am appointed, even though he's appointed for a permanent, indefinite term.
Right.
Well, I said, which would you rather be, appointed for an indefinite term or employees? They can kick me out either way.
Yeah, because he's non-represented, so, right?
He's not represented, yeah.
But he is reviewed every year as an employee.
Yes,
Oh, yes.
yes.
Wait,
The only people who are not, the only non-represented people who are not reviewed are the elected officials.
So is there some difference in how he gets compensated? He's not represented, but his compensation, method of compensation would be the same, employee versus appointed?
Actually,
Correct.
I was
The
gonna ask Wayne
difference
that
would be
question.
more in line with how you get rid of somebody.
Okay.
Yeah. that's
They're
an
both
issue.
at will?
Everybody's at will.
Yeah.
Okay, but, you know, if you're appointed by the full board, would it not require the full board to terminate you?
Absolutely, I would think, is that correct, Wayne?
That would be correct.
Yeah.
There could be a process and a hearing, depending upon
Yeah.
what the fact pattern was.
Got it, yeah.
Or the board could just say, we no longer want him.
Yeah, and there
Independent of the
are,
decision by the town administrator.
Totally, if he's an appointed official.
Right.
and there are some positions you'll see as we go through, particularly the building official, he's appointed, or should ever do that, for a specific term. And at the end of that term, there is no action there is no action necessary if you don't wish to continue their employment. You simply appoint a new inspector.
How many appointed officials have no terms, such as this one?
I think it might only be, I'll have to go look and see exactly how many of the department heads are appointed by the full board. The only ones, it's easier to say the ones that have a specific term. The health director, the assessor, and the building inspector each have specific terms.
Right.
The other thing is, after somebody's term ends, you don't have to reappoint them every time. They're like an elected official in that they would serve until their successor is appointed.
Correct.
So, you know, just because somebody has a 4-year term, if you don't reappoint them at the end of their 4-year term,
They remain.
it doesn't mean they're good for another 4.
No, they remain until their successor is appointed.
In the old days of politics, appointment was the way to go, because when a new regime came in, they appointed their buddies.
Right.
So it's kind of a holdover, if you will, to the old political spoils game, as against an employee who is
Somebody
hired,
Bring in their friend.
reports to the town administrator, reports to the first selectman, which is a more business-like, modern-day approach, and not as susceptible to politics and people changing, you know, I got my butcher, now it's gonna make him a building inspector, whatever.
Or my plumber, my electrician.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that, I think that, is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, and you know, the building inspector also, there's a state statute with the terms in it, but it's, I think it's important with some of the positions that there not be that susceptibility to, the turnover. You know, maybe a little prejudice, having been the finance director in the past, but, you know, that's one position that you'll see in some communities, they have a term and it runs with the mayor or the first selectman.
Yeah.
And that's a very bad thing, in my opinion, because it's, you know, it's one position that,
Yeah, public,
It's-
especially given the nature of their projects, I mean, they're.
their projects and their knowledge, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
So I think it's kind of, you know, as you're dealing with these, it's, you know, it's something that you should think about with some of these ones that you'll find popping up in the charter as appointed officials. Do you want to continue that?
So operationally though, you do Ed's review? or
Yes, I do.
Yes.
you jointly?
Jamie
So-
attends all the meetings, and I prepare the evaluation And,
So from a functional, operational standpoint, he's operating currently as an employee, right?
yes, in that
Yes.
way, yes.
Okay.
And then we review, I think, the whole list as sort of a, a big package, right?
You review the pay package.
Right,
And
each year, which is the
We
recommendation.
typically don't
from-
share with you what,
So it's-
what the
Individuals, right.
individual evaluations were.
Right, we look at the,
so it seems like this is a change to sort of bring us up to what our actual practices are. Okay.
Our practices have gotten modern, but our charter is still
Our charter is
in the old
stuck,
days.
stuck in the old days.
Well, and in that respect, if something happened and Ed retired or what have you, would we go about it in a manner similar to an employee or someone who was appointed?
We have, with most of the department heads, I'm not sure if I could say it all, but we follow a very thorough process where we have a screening panel. And then, definitely for all the high level, like, like in Ed, the Board of Selectmen interviews the top candidates. I can't say for sure that we've done it with every single department head, and, some were hired before me. But we do a very thorough, process.
But that process is as if the department head candidate is an employee.
Yes.
The only difference is that the screening committee screens out the top, gives us the top 3 that we interview, and then we make the ultimate appointment,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
yeah, that's similar to the Board of Ed, where the administration brings forth the principals and the cabinet, and they're still interviewed by the Board of Ed, but unless we see, or we saw a glaring issue, you would be affirming the recommendation by the.
So you are the final appointment in that case? Or you just interview and it's informative to the process?
If we had an issue, we would bring it to the administration, who would have the final say.
The administration has the final say. So
The
yeah,
superintendent
okay.
is the only role in which the Board of Ed, we would recommend if
I
we
see.
found a glaring issue.
Okay.
I almost see Jamie and Kate as the administration here, I mean,
Right.
running town
Right.
hall.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I agree, so I can see this as as an employee.
Unless, he would have some objection to it for some reason that I can't fathom at this time.
At the moment, unless there's something in state statute, I think that given the fundamental importance of the role of the Public Works Director and the things that they work on, I would think a hiring practice as an employee would lend itself to the town of Darien always having the very best candidate be put forward, absent any political maneuverings.
Sounds right.
Agreed, given the nature of some of the projects in this town.
Correct.
Yeah.
Would it be appropriate to have the Board of Selectmen still be involved in in the interview process, or somehow recommend that, or no?
I would think
Ladies.
that for certain key positions,
right.
to have something similar to the way the Board of Education does, where
That would be my
ultimately the
recommendation.
administration has the final say, but the board gets to do a meet and greet with candidates.
Yeah, and I think
I
it's
would like
often a
that.
very good resource for the first selectman to be able to have the other selectmen interview the candidate.
Yeah, I would like to see that embedded, if we move to an employee, but that the Board of Selectmen is involved in the
I think that's
hiring, or however
tricky
you-
to, I think that's tricky to recommend as a piece of the charter.
Okay,
I mean,
then,
because that's a procedural thing.
Fair enough,
Make
fair enough.
make it an operating practice, not a.
Correct.
a
Right.
Okay, fair
program
enough.
charter.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any further discussion on that issue? We seem,
Yeah, no,
In
it's
agreement?
good.
okay, and Wayne, you'll do a statutes
will.
check for us
Yes, I will.
on both those issues, the name superintendent versus director, and if there's any stumbling blocks to it being an employee, a hire versus an appoint. Okay. Then we will move to item 25B, which is he or she shall appoint his or her, I'm adding the her in there to modernize this language, his or her subordinates and employees, and shall prescribe their duties and fix their compensation within the appropriation for their department. Such a superintendent shall, upon appointment and thereafter as often as may be necessary, certify to the Board of Selectmen the name of the employee acting as his assistant. So this is confusing to me, kind of in its entirety, other than it's probably two different things. We know that Darren is the assistant Public Works Director.
Yes.
I have never had him have the director certify to me or the board.
I think
That
this is
issue.
one of those sections that it exists, but
It's not in practice.
is antiquated and, you know.
Right.
This Director of Public Works does not fix the compensation of his employees.
And he doesn't appoint either. He's part
Correct.
of the hiring process. So in practice, we've already changed
Yeah,
how this works.
yeah, and that's why this kind of review is
Yeah.
good to, you know.
When was the last time this was looked at, the charter for this
There was
section?
a full charter revision commission,
Of 5?
sometime before I think before 2010.
There have been minor changes over the last couple of years through the
Yeah.
RTM. The last major review in my recollection would have been back in around 1997.
No, there was one.
No, there was
not.
not, there was definitely a
Yeah,
charter,
commission,
yeah.
yeah.
But it
Well, I
failed. The
see.
work of
Right.
that commission
Right.
failed.
Yes.
And from that came the agreement that the RTM could take up
It would,
administrative
yeah.
changes in a one-off manner.
And they have done that on occasion
Correct.
within the
Yeah.
last few years.
Correct.
I can think of 2 or 3 of them that they have done.
Yep. Yep.
I think operationally, if we have some very different practices, then they should be removed.
But you know what I think is great about this process is, you know, Kate, you're involved in these discussions. You know, you've been around for a long time. We have a different perspective as a Board of Selectmen and how we interact with, you know, the procedures and people that are outlined in the charter. So I don't know how that transpired with a full charter revision, who was actually engaged in that process. So.
That's a story for another time.
And that was clearly the one that was done back in 1997, which took 2 years, the bulk of which then failed.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Well, the next
That's a
one-
different process.
yeah.
That's not having our RTM do it, that's the state process.
But yes, and one of the reasons why the most recent one, which was, I think in the mid-2000s.
Right, because that's what that was,
Right.
had to do with the quantity, the number of people on the RTM. I remember that was a big issue. whether
I don't
they were-
remember that one, but there was
we
a
were
lot
gonna
of
shrink
issues
it.
around the budget and the approval of the budget.
Well,
And, you know, one of the things that came out in that whole process was, if I'm correct, had they changed the charter through that process at that time, if the
Right, they
revision had been
would've-
successful, that would have been the only way to make changes in the
Correct.
future, is following a similar process.
right, right,
Um,
right.
Okay.
That's right, I remember that
Okay.
now.
Keep in mind that we are, as I was saying before, we are one of the relatively few committees, few towns that have the ability within itself to make changes in the charter. We do not have to follow the state process, which can take literally years, which is much
Yes.
more convoluted, much more time-consuming, much more expensive. We and a few other towns within the state, under our right of home rule, have the right to make certain changes in our charter by action of our RTM.
That's very good news.
Yeah, there's like 10 towns
Yeah.
out of the
Mhm.
entire state. That's amazing.
Not a lot of them.
Fortunately.
Yeah. We can't change anything. It's got to be limited to the rights we have under Section 98 of the Charter.
Mhm. No, but
That's why in 1997, they went this state process, because they wanted to make very specific, intense changes, which is a whole different process.
So for this section 25B, I think I concur with the fact that we could remove it.
I think it should be removed.
just removed or
Is it-
rewritten?
Remove.
Is it, should be?
I don't think I wouldn't rewrite it simply because I don't
Okay.
think it's necessary.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not an element that would be necessary in the charter. It's
Again, more
it's again addressing operational practice.
The more
Right.
time you put words in something, and more time it's gonna get
The truth of the matter
misinterpreted.
is that each of the subordinates has a job description, and when there's a position that needs to be filled, you know, it goes out into the marketplace, candidates are brought in and vetted, and there are market-driven salary ranges, so there's no salaries that are determined by anything other than a full and legitimate human resource process.
Mhm.
So, in that respect, should C, D, and E, are they considered operational? I mean, are those things accurate?
C, D, and E, I mean,
I had an issue with B that I wanted to bring up. Since we're looking at this section.
I don't have my iPad in front of me, I thought we just discussed 25B.
Oh, no, the other, content in B.
I see.
okay,
Maybe you're saying strike B entirely.
right.
No. Okay, the issue I had with 25, section 25, section B, to clarify that the bills are paid by the town treasurer. Is that correct? I just wanted to clarify that.
No, that's,
Okay.
well, so technically, you know, depends on how you define it. The town treasurer's signature is on the checks.
Hmm.
Okay, I thought that would be the director of finance, but that's
It
what I was
can
just
be, but the director of finance is allowed to sign the checks, but generally the checks are, they're electronically signed.
Okay,
And
so
unless the treasurer is out of town when we're signing checks or unavailable in some way, it's her signature. that
okay,
is
so
signed.
paid by the town treasurer is still appropriate. Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Are we
And the
looking at
finance, the
same
finance
document?
director would only be acting as the town treasurer in that instance, so it is the town treasurer.
Kip, we're looking at Munis
Right.
right now?
Yeah.
What?
We're looking
Yes,
at
it-
Munis, the full code. Those are just Kate's recommendations.
If we were
Yeah,
gonna
those
look
are
at
just
the
my
charter, I
thoughts.
was gonna look at the charter.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But yes, Jamie, you're right, the finance
Yeah.
director acts in the treasurer's stead
Correct.
when she's unavailable.
But the only other issue I had in, under D, had to do with, the role of public works in the municipality, that they don't handle work at the police commission, board of ed, park and rec, sewer, as it's stated in A, or B rather,
I think they do though.
but
They do, it says they may undertake that things that are on the, they don't do it for the Board of Ed, but they could if the Board of
They
Ed
could.
requested them.
But, and does each board or commission, police, et cetera, vote all the time on this? As stated in B, or D rather?
So, you know, no.
Okay,
no.
so then I would throw that one out as,
We need, I think, look at C, D, and E as far as operationally, if they're accurate. I mean, if we throw out B entirely. I want to also be mindful of the time.
right, well, I think either
Yeah, no, I know.
we can start with the ones that were highlighted in the agenda and
Yeah.
Yeah.
go back, I just thought we we're gonna
Yeah.
look at public works, and go through them all.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm
Sure.
with you.
Okay, so that was what I have for public works.
Okay, anything else for Public Works? All right, we will move on to section 27, Parks and Recreation, Powers and Duties. I'm a little bit uncomfortable talking about this without a representative from the commission here, but, you know, we'll take a first discussion at it, and then I think that we should engage someone from the commission. I'll read this section here that Kate has highlighted. Said commission shall have exclusive care, maintenance, and control of all parks owned by the town. Said commission shall have power to receive on behalf of the town gifts, donations, or devices of land, that's an interesting word, devices, of land or other
Devises.
property.
Devises.
De-
Devises.
Donations or devises.
devices.
Okay, thank you, Kip. Of land or other property for park purposes, subject to the approval of a duty called representative town meeting, the dollar amount set by the Board of Selectmen as prescribed in Chapter 2, Article 2, Section 2-33 of this code. And Kate questions, do we continue to allow the Parks and Rec Commission to accept gifts? Should we change the limits or keep it tied to the Board of Selectmen limit? Should it be part of a comprehensive discussion of a gift policy? And I'll just start the discussion by saying, yes, we should have a comprehensive discussion of a gift policy.
Yeah.
And it should be standard across the town.
Yeah.
I would agree.
I would agree.
Right now, there's a provision which sets the limit of $10,000, which can be modified on a regular basis.
Mm.
Right, it's even described in the charter how much you can increase that limit every year. So one of the issues that we have seen, Wayne, is that some commissions can accept gifts, some cannot.
Yeah.
And we feel there should be a more comprehensive policy.
That's certainly appropriate.
And I'd like to offer that as part of and we'll have this discussion in full at another time, but as part of a comprehensive gift policy, the final approval of a gift should occur in a single body, so that someone can be the keeper of the information of all the gifts that have been donated and approved to the town, whether it's the Board of
Absolutely.
Finance, perhaps, sounds like the right body for that, to put the final stamp of approval on a gift.
Absolutely. I think that's critical, because for budgetary purposes, I think we need to know what's been gifted and how much is that.
And the impact of it.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Is, any other comments about that? Do you agree we should have a comprehensive gift policy?
I would absolutely agree we should have a
Completely agree. It should
comprehensive.
be a comprehensive gift policy, and I wouldn't propose to make any changes here until
Okay.
that policy is done, just in case you don't want to have to change it twice.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, we've seen this with the police commission already, so yeah.
yeah.
Okay, anything else in section 27 or section 7 Parks and Rec?
I'll just throw it out there, just for future discussion, under section 26, is the Park and Rec Director also ex officio?
So that was my question, because it says the
No,
superintendent of public works.
Staff, you'd never be considered ex officio, your staff.
Okay. I believe the commission site on the website states that.
For the commission? Okay.
Okay.
I think sometimes we,
It might just be how it's displayed as opposed to.
sometimes for like special committees, like the building committees, staff might be listed as an ex officio, but usually they're not, like I'm not an ex officio member of this commission, I'm just your staff.
Fair enough, maybe it's just the way it's displayed on the
Yeah.
website, it just needs to be, that individual in the respective bodies need to be taken off. And
I would say that it's important to note somehow that, I'm thinking particularly of a building committee, where staff is designated as ex officio, that they are non-member advisory to certain projects. It could be to certain bodies, but that staff typically, in those situations, doesn't have a vote. And I think that's the important distinction.
As a general principle, an ex officio member does not have a vote.
Correct, but if they're not designated specifically as an ex officio, I think somehow it has to be noted that they are a non-voting advisory participant member.
Correct.
Well, we know that whole topic actually has come up as far as, do we define ex officio? We had that discussion at one of our prior meetings to clarify.
Right. We did find the definition where it implied that an ex officio member could be voting.
Yes.
Correct.
And so we wanted to make that more clear if somebody was being designated, for example, the first selectman is an ex officio member of Planning and Zoning Commission, to make it clear that it's a non-voting
Right.
No.
Okay, so maybe just in general, when we see that term in any of the charter or any of the, that we clarify the
Correct.
role that that individual has.
As a general principle, they are not, but there would be no harm in still clarifying it.
Okay. Is that your legal understanding that typically when someone is designated as ex officio, that it implies non-voting status?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so, all right, then maybe we don't have to.
Because in the
But-
nonprofit community, that's not necessarily true. Maybe in the government, like on this particular side, but it's,
I think if you look at Robert's rules, as a general principle, an ex officio member is not a voting member.
Unless stated to the contrary.
Right.
Okay.
Got it.
Then we
Okay.
wouldn't have to necessarily.
Very good.
Okay. And then my last one on it, section 28, is that eminent domain? Is that what that says, basically?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify if that's what that says.
Can you read it, please, Kate, for those of us
Oh,
that don't
sorry.
have our
So,
iPad?
the town is authorized to take land by condemnation proceedings for the purpose of public parks and public parkways within its limits and to lay out, improve, and maintain the same. The Board of Selectmen on its behalf is authorized to acquire such land for such purposes. If it cannot agree with the owner upon the amount to be paid him for land thus taken, it may proceed to condemn such land in the manner set forth in section 48-12 of the general statutes as it may be amended, provided no land shall be taken for such purposes unless the Town Planning and Zoning Commission shall first have approved in writing the site to be taken and have certified that public necessity and public convenience require such taking.
Thank you.
And I wonder, Wayne, if that
Eminent
section.
domain is, generally speaking, condemnation.
Yeah.
So, correct, and that's the title of that section, condemnation for public parks and parkways. So I just wanted to make sure I understood what it was saying.
Rarely used by that
Right.
commission.
Right. Did you have a suggestion on that, Kate?
I was just wondering if the New London case needed, would cause us to have to update anything in this.
The New London case has basically been codified by the legislature. So the processes that were deemed appropriate or not in that case have now been codified,
So that section, that reference to the state statutes would cover that.
will be updated, correct?
Okay, anything else in Parks and Rec? All right, then we'll go on to building and zoning. Building official and zoning official. Section 29, Kate has outlined subsection A, building official, there shall be a building official appointed by the Board of Selectmen for a 4-year term. The building official shall meet the qualifications for this position specified in General Statute 29-261 and may be referred to as building inspector.
All right, and what I included there is 29-260, which is the state statute, which says that the chief executive officer shall appoint basically the building officer, unless other means are already provided. So ours provides for the full Board of Selectmen to appoint, but under the state statutes, it could be just the first selectman.
Does this go back to the employee versus appointed?
Yeah, but this one, this one does have to be a 4-year term.
I also don't think this does a very good job of differentiating between what I've always referred to this individual as the chief building official versus the other building inspectors that work under him or her.
Actually, does David Keating, who's the building inspector,
No,
David
he's
Keating
he's
is
the
in
zoning
planning
official.
and zoning,
I know he's in planning and zoning.
right?
But isn't he often a building inspector or not?
No, he's
No.
a zoning officer.
Just
Yeah.
zoning? Okay. So it's the other guys that work under Pete.
Correct.
And you really want to have him be appointed?
I'm not sure about that.
I'm very not sure about
Yeah.
that. This is where many towns have gotten big corruption by the mayor coming in, my buddy's gonna be the building inspector, I'll get all my favors done, I get kickbacks, everything will work out just fine, no problem. We'll get you through. Versus a hired employee who maybe you have to renew his employment every 4 years under state statute, but at least,
Yeah.
Agreed.
I don't know.
I wonder, I
What-
would love to know if any other town has gone to an employment model versus an appointment model for chief building inspector.
And
We could find that out pretty readily, I think.
Yeah.
Wayne, is there a what would be the mechanism for someone that had to be effectively reemployed every 4 years? What's the mechanism of how that works?
Okay, we can find that out also.
Yeah, because that's a differentiating wrinkle
Mhm.
that, you know.
Maybe it works like a contract, you know, you have a contract for 4 years and it's renewable,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, that could work, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Seems like that would, yeah, intuitively.
Mhm.
I think, you know, going back to another comment you made, Jamie, there are differences between being the chief building official
Right,
and being building inspector, because you can have building inspectors who are not certified in all phases, you know, of inspection. Like, you know, people occasionally tell you, you know, somebody's been fully certified, that they can do it all now,
mhm.
as opposed to being just a plumbing inspector or just an electrical inspector.
So that I understand. So I could see, you know, as we currently have it, that we have one building official that is currently appointed by the Board of Selectmen. But it says here, and may be referred to as the building inspector.
Yep.
I would not refer to the building official as the building inspector. That's a duty of the building official. But I wouldn't refer to them as that. I would differentiate in terms of language. Okay, so we can consider, again, an employment model. Are there any other thoughts on the building and zoning section?
What did I have? In section 30, the Building Board of Appeals, we could just table that.
Yeah, let's, you know, I really want to
Yeah.
have that discussion
Sure.
because it's an interesting Board of Appeals. It's a set of people with specific trade skills that in my tenure here have never been called upon for any reason. So I'd like to have a greater discussion about how are we handling any issues that would have otherwise gone before a building board of appeals currently. It would be hard to imagine that we haven't had anything like that in the last 10 years, and if we haven't, then perhaps we don't need that board of appeal. Although that's very statutory, isn't it, Wayne, where
It
you
is,
have to
yes.
have a way to appeal a decision.
Very rarely meet, very rarely. I can recall a meeting once.
So what's hard for us is when you have a board of appeals like that, it's a group of people that are volunteers. And you can't keep volunteers if they don't meet but every 12 years, right?
True.
Perfect.
So if we could,
It's like, I like it.
so if we could come up with another appeal mechanism, then it would make the work of that body moot. Maybe it's something that we could convene a board of appeals when the need arises.
Or it could be just that they go to the
Right.
state. I do know that there have been times when we've instructed people to appeal to the state
Right,
for an override.
okay.
I just would want to,
So we'll just put 30 under future
Yep.
discussion. Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Anything else? All right. In the interest of time, then let's move on to new business item number 2, discuss the process to fill the town clerk position. And we're going to turn to Wayne to walk us through that process.
I think I would initially refer you to what is Section 8 of our charter. Section 8 deals with a number of different possibilities. In particular, subsection 8C would be the one that would be applicable here. I won't read the whole section to you, but a vacancy in the position of any town official elected to a full term of 2 years, other than the selectmen, which is an entirely different set of statutes and charter citations, shall be filled by appointment by the Board of Selectmen for the unexpired portion of the term. In conjunction with that, I think you also need to read subparagraph D, the applicable provisions of which would read that when the person vacating an office has been elected as a member of a political party. Such vacancy shall be filled by the appointment of a member of the same political party. So in this case, if it was a Republican town clerk, as an example, it would need to be replaced by a Republican. Vice versa, if it was a Democrat. So too, I can see a question coming up which relates to, again, to our charter. And this would be subsection 6, appointive officers. And it provides that those appointed individuals, as authorized by the code, by the charter, under subparagraph B, all appointments by the Board of Selectmen shall be by an affirmative vote of the first selectman and at least 2 other members of the Board of Selectmen. In the unfortunate situation we are dealing with our town clerk, I do not think that would be applicable, because that would be applicable to appointed positions, whereas we are dealing with the filling of a vacancy for an elected position. So in this case, with respect to the town clerk, it would be done by your board, by a majority vote of your board, with no particular weight being given to the vote of the first selectman.
That makes sense.
And the only other requirement is that it has to be of similar party.
Correct.
Right.
That is also under our charter. That's also subsection 8.
That's what I, wrote down. Okay.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that? I've done some initial outreach to the Republican Town Committee in this case, have yet to hear back, so I imagine it will take them some time to consider candidates for us. Okay, there's nothing more. Thank you, Wayne.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate that.
And the unelected term goes until this coming November?
January,
Oh, that's right, it's a calendar year thing, isn't it?
right. They would have to run in November.
Yes. The election
And
will
the
be in
term
November.
ends in January.
Okay. But the term that we would be appointing someone to would last until December 31st or whatever it is.
It's actually the first Monday in January.
First Monday of January,
Mhm.
2022.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
20, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, we'll move on to minutes. We have review and approval of minutes from the November 16th regular meeting. Any corrections or additions? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve as presented.
So approved? So
Kip
moved?
moves. May I have a second?
Second.
Sarah, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. Thank
I
you.
like the brevity.
Special meeting
Yeah.
minutes, pardon?
Do you like the
I
breakfast?
like the brevity, I'm just sorry, editorial.
Okay. Special meeting minutes of November 16th. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Kip moves. May I have a second?
Second.
Sarah seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. And then regular meeting minutes of November 2nd. Nothing? All right. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Sarah moves. May I have a second?
Second?
Kip seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. Kate, is there any public comment for this evening?
No.
Okay, very good. Agenda review. I think the one thing that I would like to just plant the seed, because as I was drafting my State of the Town address, I began to think about some things that, might be ripe for discussion after the year turns. So if there are other things that board members want this body to take up that may or may not have budget implications, I'd like to begin to think about that.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Krista moves. I'll take Kip's as a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. And hope to see you at the State of the Town.
Yes, good luck, I'm gonna watch you.